Here's what you missed this week on The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Because we are having an interview today, we had a chance to talk with Katy Carl, editor of Luminor, Word on Fire's literary imprint, author of As Earth Without Water and Fragile Objects. She serves as writer-in-residence at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, senior affiliate fellow of PIN's Program for Research on Religion and Urban Civil Society, and editor emeritus of Dappled Things, a journal of ideas, art, and Catholic faith. Bud is away right now doing dean-like things, so he couldn't join me. So here I am, being the field marshal for the beginning and end of The Uncommon Good. I'm Bo Bonner. You might also know me from being the morning show host of the Catholic Morning Show here on Iowa Catholic Radio. The Uncommon Good, of course, here transmitting in the middle of the country, in the middle of Iowa, between the two rivers. Thank you for making sure to join The Uncommon Good. Folks, we've been at it for 8 years, and it's always wonderful to have all of you with us. Iowa Catholic Radio has been at this for 20 years, and we just got to celebrate that this last week. So if we got to run into folks, I got to see many folks. It was wonderful to have you all with us. Being up there on stage, getting the chance to sort of shake hands and wave with two shows, the Catholic Morning Show. But, of course, this one, The Uncommon Good, a very honored moment in my life to be up there with Bud. They ran little clips of the shows, so we got to hear sort of a small highlight reel of our shows. And I was really glad that Aidan Pugh, who does sound design, produces shows, does all sorts of wonderful things for Iowa Catholic Radio, picked out one where Bud and I were talking about being at the top of the food chain over dinosaurs, and I felt like that represented a lot of the energy of our show. So we're going to keep that going as well, like we said. Not only we're not going to phone it in, we're not going to stop bringing up things like food chains and dinosaurs, but we're hoping to go 8 more years ourselves. We're hoping that Iowa Catholic Radio goes 20 more years, and of course beyond all of that. But it was a wonderful retrospective to think about being part of Iowa Catholic Radio for nearly half of its life, and to think about all of the people Iowa Catholic Radio has touched throughout the years. It is an honor to be a part of the radio network. Just throwing that out, if you're thinking about how wonderful it is to be a part of something that's 8 years old or 20 years old, or speaking to the truths of the faith that are timeless, always make sure to consider donating, especially here during Lent, during the seasons of alms. And you can do that at iowacatholicradio.com at the donation button. You can call 515-223-1150 and leave a message, or text 515-223-1150. A lot going on in the world of Catholic social teaching. You could imagine, one of the things we always try to do, I know Bud and I are very intentional about this, is not to try to get caught up too much in the news. There's a lot of people who get to comment on the news, as it were, straight out of the horse's mouth the minute it happens. I like that we always get the chance to ruminate things, chew on things, maybe get a little bit more of a distilled take on things. But one thing that I'm always surprised, right, is it's actually the centenary of Flannery O'Connor's birth, and sometimes people forget the very central role that Iowa played in making Flannery O'Connor the writer that she was. She was at the Iowa Writers' Workshop, and so you can actually go over and hang out at the church Flannery O'Connor prayed at as she was honing her craft in graduate school before she started writing the stories that made her famous. 100 years in the making, not quite breaking news, and less than that if you think about that she went as a young adult, as it were, over there at Iowa. But certainly timely, I think, to be bringing up Flannery, her time in Iowa, and maybe get people just taking a short trip to the eastern part of the state and maybe run around the actual ground that Flannery O'Connor herself walked around, the church she was at, but getting to talk with Katy Carl, who spoke at an event over in Iowa City that was specifically about that, is going to be exciting stuff. So this is The Uncommon Good, Bo Bonner with Dr. Marr. When the actual interview takes place, no worries. Stick around. We'll be right back after this. With us today, we're going to actually have an interview. We're glad to have her with her. Katy Carl, writer-in-residence at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, editor-in-chief emerita of Dappled Things magazine, author of As Earth Without Water and Fragile Objects. Senior Affiliate Fellow of the Program for Research on Religion and Urban Civil Society. And then just this year, Luminor with Word on Fire Press, which is where you're going to see wonderful things like short stories, novels, memoirs, poetry, and all the more. The editor there. Katy, thank you for coming on The Uncommon Good.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight. Thanks.
Now, the beyond the sheer odyssey of us trying to figure out a good time to talk, which that someday we'll write a memoir and half of a chapter or two will be about making a time that worked out. But what really spurred this on is, so you got to come to Iowa City for this the 100-year celebration of Flannery O'Connor's birthday. And I know in good Catholic time, we would have all talked about this and advertised for the event, but you guys had the event. And it was such a thrilling idea that even though we weren't able to do this before the event, we wanted to make sure and talk to you and what it was you talked about. So if you don't mind setting the scene, Iowa, why Iowa City? Why do people maybe not understand the connection of very southern Flannery O'Connor with the University of Iowa? And what did you get a chance to talk about amongst all these Iowans?
Right. So Flannery O'Connor, as many know, studied for her Master's in Fine Arts in Creative Writing for Fiction at the University of Iowa, which is one of the premier, in fact, flagship creative writing programs in the United States, if not the entire world. It's splendid, celebrated, extremely well-known, well-respected program, and that has been true ever since O'Connor's day up to ours. But I think a couple of things tend to happen. Either people understand the literary resonances of her career but don't understand her faith as well, or they understand her faith very well but don't understand the literary resonances. So I wanted to bring those two threads together because bringing those together is incredibly important to me, to the faith and writing community that I serve. And I think it was also just really necessary to show that she still has quite a bit to teach us in our time. She wasn't writing just for her own time. She is very much writing for that reader in 100 years that she hoped to reach. And it's been 100 years since her birth, not quite 100 since she began to write now. She says she began to write and read seriously at the same time, and that was during her master's studies when she came to Iowa. So without Iowa City and without the Iowa Writers Workshop, we wouldn't have the Flannery O'Connor that we know, that we love. So it's been a real honor to get to come to the city, to the parish where she prayed. This parish has a role in O'Connor's background in her work, specifically because it was the place where she brought her doubts and her worries and her concerns as a very young writer, as a very young person of faith. She worried that her work would scandalize people, upset people, that it would be too dark and too deviant and too ugly, because she was writing about the realities of sin and grace and redemption and sometimes people's rejection of redemption. So she really was deeply concerned that she was doing something that would cause spiritual harm, maybe to herself, to others. So she went to a priest at the parish and she laid this all out for him, and he gave her guidance and counsel. And he said, essentially, as she retells it in her letters, you don't have to write for 15-year-old girls. You can write for adults. You can write for the savvy, the educated reader, and you can write for a general audience and not have to pull your punches, so to speak. You can write the reality of sin. You can write the reality of the human darkness that follows on the fall. And you don't have to worry if you're writing from a place of sincerity and a place of integrated devotion. You don't have to worry that you're going to lead people astray, because you yourself are not being led astray by that. And that turns out to be the exact advice that Jacques Maritain gives in Art and Scholasticism. It turns out to be the exact advice that Francois Mauriac gives in his long essay, God and Mammon, which is very much about these same problems, these same quandaries, these same struggles that Mauriac faced as a young writer in France, just a couple decades before O'Connor started getting to work. So it was a landmark for her, though, that conversation, and she was a very regular attendee. She would go to Mass, go to Sunday Mass, I believe for a period even go to daily Mass, and receive and sincerely go through these deep spiritual engagements that we also see evidence of in her prayer journal. God, make me a writer, make me a good writer. Let Christian principles permeate my writing, she wrote, and let there be enough of my writing for Christian principles to permeate. I think she struggled immensely to write, not only to write well, but even to give presence to anything on the page. She thought very seriously about every word she put down, and that's why we have so much of such incredible quality from her. She really has been called perhaps the only great novelist that America has ever produced. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but she is one of our greats. And part of the reason why she is great is this intense spiritual engagement that she brought to everything that she did with her literary art. So it's important to talk about that, especially in the Catholic context, because that is the context in which she worked.
It's funny that I think about Flannery's worries about being too much for the age. And I always think this is funny, too, because, of course, the other great novelist we get handed even to, by the Europeans is Melville. And he was beyond extra just talking about whales before we even get to his prose. So it's,
That's right.
she's worried about this, and that makes sort of sense. But so Bud and I literally have just got done the last 3 weeks talking about the Vatican document on artificial intelligence. And the reason why I think that this is so timely to talk about Flannery turning 100, as it were, and the state of writing and creative writing, particularly in 2025 the United States, it's actually her willingness to let grace sort of thunderbolt into words themselves that is now becoming sort of the bellwether of the human. And when I think about what we are wrestling with when it comes to creative work, it's not so much the generative aspect. I think in some ways you can even imagine 20 years ago the argument being like, oh, well, we're running out of things to say. There's really not much creative things to do. Haven't we made the wells gone dry? But here we are sitting with the generative aspect, and it's Flannery who goes to show that there's something that the robots will never figure out about letting the spirit of a work make us stand back, right? I've never read anything wonderful by ChatGPT. I've read great summaries by ChatGPT, but wonder and awe, the robots have not figured that out yet. Do you think that sort of timeliness, right, that what she was worried about in her age, sort of scandalizing people, the scandal we're now all facing is robots taking over what humans have done for centuries. Maybe she was waiting for a second act to sort of rattle us out of our slumber with ChatGPT and things like that on the horizon.
I agree with you. It's tremendously well timed. I think what O'Connor and Melville and another writer that they both greatly admired, Hawthorne, and many of these other greats have in common is the human voice. And there's nothing that replaces that voice. And we know it when we hear it, and we know it when we don't. And a machine can only ever be what the humans who made it program and guide and tweak and shepherd it into being. We can try to say that it's the achievement of the machine, but that it's really always an expression of something human behind it. Whatever the machine does is only because humans made it do that. So no matter how quote unquote good, if that's even the right metric or rubric to apply to the text that comes out of ChatGPT, which, as you say, tends to be very flat and uninspiring. No matter how smooth it gets, no matter how polished it gets, no matter how convincing it gets, it's never going to supersede some thought or some input that some human gave it first. I remember taking computer classes as a kid and being given this acronym, and I've never heard anyone say it in a conversation about AI yet. And I'm really, really surprised that I have never heard anyone deploy this acronym, GIGO. Do you know this? This is garbage in, garbage out.
Oh, yes. That's a very nice way to put it. I was thinking, have you ever read Harry Frankfurt's book on BS? That's what I was thinking. But yes, same principle. Same principle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, same principle. Exactly. If you feed it a lame prompt, you're going to get lame text. If you use it for just doing some of the rote standardization tasks that have to be done editorially, then congratulations, you did some rote standardization. But the human spirit is always going to have to come from a human. It's never going to come from a machine.
Katy, I stumbled upon this wonderful interview that you have with Word on Fire about contemporary Catholic fiction, and it was refreshing for me. I try not to turn the show into like slaying the ghost of my past, but
where are we going here?
I grew up in a community where there was like a real strict divide between like Christian and secular art. And sometimes that meant that Christian art was sort of just like, I don't know, the emphasis was less on the aesthetic quality and more just the bluntness of the message, I guess, or sometimes like taking something that was beautiful and overlaying like Christian text or something like that, you know. And this article, you get into the important role that tragedy can play in our life, and just like your appreciation for that form of literature. There's this quote, I love this part, the problems start to grow when we try to cheat art or life out of easy conclusions without engaging real complexity. Sometimes we just want the takeaway, the capsule version, the executive summary. And what first like drew me to Flannery O'Connor, she's totally resistant to that. And I never heard someone like sort of express the operation of God's grace in the way that she does. For those of our listeners who maybe are less familiar with her work, or I don't know, got turned off to it by some point, could you talk about like sort of like the way that she captures the complexity of reality and, you know, even is willing to let tragedy have its voice like in her stories?
Yeah. To further articulate or to unpack what you're saying here, she herself has a wonderful line in one of her essays about how the story is the message. And if you could tell the message in any other way than the story, then you should, because the story is not the most efficient way to get to the message. If you have a message, just send your message. If you want to tell a story, then you need to tell a story. The two forms are profoundly different. As far as O'Connor and tragedy, I think the story that comes to mind most vividly for me with this is The Lame Shall Enter First. And this is one where the dad adopts a young boy who's been in trouble and sort of uses the example of this young boy to shame his own son, who he feels is sort of soft and indulgent and gets his own way and is spoiled, and he wants to show him that other people in the world appreciate what they have because they haven't always had it good, and the son has always had it good. It is kind of a prodigal son story, but with a twist, in that the father in the story is not a God image. He's not a God model. He's not good. He's a very deeply flawed human being. And it turns out so is the boy who gets adopted, and so is the son. I mean, it's Dostoevskian in that there really is no truly perfectly good character. Of course, as I say that, I'm thinking of Alyosha, I'm thinking of Mishkin, but I'm thinking don't think of those novels when I say Dostoevsky, and think more of the Possessed, where there's truly no model in that story. There's just the depth of human depravity. So in O'Connor, right, the lame shall enter first is one of these very dark stories where it can be hard to see the redemption. And I think it can be one where if it's the first one that you pick up by her, it's probably going to put you off. It's not the starting point that I would recommend. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's an open question. Maybe that's a whole show unto itself. Is should everyone have been introduced to Flannery O'Connor by A Good Man's Hard to Find? That's like a good open question. I mean, I love it, but is that the first one you should read? Sorry for interrupting.
You know, it's the most commonly anthologized, but I would put Revelation over that one. I would put The Enduring Chill.
Yep.
And I would put A Temple of the Holy Ghost. Those are probably in my top three.
Yeah, and I mean, for me too, right? I would. I'm a loser who would lose people very fast, because I would actually have them read Mystery and Manners first, because I love what she writes so much. But part of this is being someone from the South and sort of from Oklahoma, right, and having a sort of mythology that precedes you. And I'm always interested about how she does that, right? But you know, there's multiple people that are important to my life that keep intersecting with Flannery, and it would seem like I'm just making it about me, but she begs you to do that, right? Like even people who aren't from any sort of life like hers, I feel like they read those and then they start thinking about their incarnational qualities, what makes their life particular to their life. And so when she says, you know, what she does about if you have a message to say, just say the message. It reminds me of Marshall McLuhan, that the medium is the message, and that actually the medium of the story sometimes is more important, or even more important, than what seems to be the content and the sort of message you're supposed to get. And I do worry sometimes people flatten Flannery precisely in that way, as they're like, oh, well, you know, here's the paint by numbers version of something like Parker's Back or something like this. But Flannery, I think, is always full of surprises for people who will pay close attention. That, of course, she has very big, wide, you know, violent movements of plot, you know, that she kind of makes, that's her bread and butter in some ways. But that always seems to me to be for the sake of subtlety that a lot of people maybe don't stick in for, and that I think sometimes you see in her own writings, people missing for what they think is just the grotesque or the Southern stories, as it were.
Right. She resists the kind of flattening treatment that we tend to want to give. She resists the kind of easy cliches about region, and she's so incredibly attentive to every word in the sentence. If you're not paying the kind of attention that she was paying, you're going to miss things. But the wonderful thing about her sentences is that they teach you to pay that kind of attention.
Yeah, I think of Simone Weil, like, who writes a lot about attention, and I'm sorry, it just literally just got done teaching a class that earlier today. And I think that Flannery is this person who bears that out, that attention is akin to prayer. There's actually something very prayerful about Flannery's stories, even if it seems on the face of the page to be very unprayerful, as it were, and even blasphemous, depending on like some of the characters that you're talking about. We have about a minute before we take our first break. If you just will say that, maybe make this point to land it. You threw out three stories that are your some of your favorites. What do you think those are examples of precisely some of these principles we've been throwing out here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I taught The Enduring Chill and A Temple of the Holy Ghost in the same morning this past summer. The way that they flow together, the way that every single word in those stories is calibrated to get the effect that she's looking for and no other effect. She's going to defy expectations and refuse any meaning that's not the meaning that she intended. She reminds me of John Gardner's dictum. And John Gardner, being a writing teacher in the 70s and 80s, saying perfection is hitting exactly what you're aiming at and not touching by a hair what you're not. That's Flannery.
Oh, I think so. And look, that's a good way to cap off this first segment here. This is The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr. We're speaking with Katy Carl, and we'll be back right after this. We are interviewing Katy Carl, writer-in-residence at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, editor-in-chief emerita of Dappled Things magazine, author of As Earth Without Water and Fragile Objects, senior affiliate fellow, the Program for Research on Religion and Urban Civil Society, and editor at Luminor, which is with Word on Fire Press. Katy, thank you for joining the show again.
Guys, thank you so much for having me on the show. This is just a joy.
Now, I want to bring up one fictional character that has nothing to do with Flannery O'Connor, and that's Billikens, because as it turns out, you and Bud both have St. Louis University connections, which I thought was fitting because the Enduring Chill, right, has a Jesuit in it.
Well, yeah, and
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's right. I didn't learn my lesson because my oldest daughter is going to a Jesuit school, so it will carry on through generations.
Now, did you get the literary bug at SLU? Was it just being in St. Louis? Was it the Cardinals? Was it Imo's Pizza?
No, long before. I wanted to write since I could read, and that's been a really long time now. I grew up in a house full of books, really grateful to my parents for emphasizing reading, dragging me to the not dragging, I was dragging them to the library. I went to Catholic schools all the way up. I had a fantastic AP English teacher who was tough on my writing in all the right ways and encouraging to my writing in all the right ways. She's the reason, in part, why I got to go up to Iowa in high school for a 2-week high schoolers workshop. That was around the time I was beginning to discover Flannery, but then I had only read A Good Man Is Hard to Find. It was at SLU, in a wonderful library up there, that I discovered the full collection, including The Habit of Being, which, along with Mystery and Manners, really changed my life. It really blew my mind when I was asking these questions, these same exact questions that we talked about in the last segment. Can a Catholic be a writer? Can you do it without compromising or soft pedaling or watering down your faith? Do you have to compromise in some kind of way? Or, can you find a really profound confluence between these two things? Flannery was there for me when I was answering or trying to answer those questions for myself. Having to find my way out from under her influence was maybe as profound an event as finding my way into it, but both have been deeply necessary to my own development as a writer. And growing up in the South, obviously, an Irish Catholic female writer growing up in the Deep South, it was hard not to feel a certain kinship there. Right.
I understand that. Well, I'm not saying Flannery is a saint, like as far as canonized, but one characteristic all saints have is they start haunting people. John Henry Newman has haunted me. I could just go down the lines. Flannery's definitely haunted me, and in very peculiar ways. But one that I think is interesting that goes back to the talk that you just gave in Iowa City. So the prayer journal, which came out only recently, Flannery O'Connor's prayer journal, I heard one of her prayers in the oddest places I think I ever could. There's a movie called Blaze. It's about Blaze Foley, who is this very avant-garde country musician, Austin scene, all this weird stuff. But they actually have his girlfriend say the prayer about, Scotch eggs? And I was like, where on earth is this coming from? But evidently someone read the prayer journal, placed it in this movie. I just think it's interesting how Flannery comes up at all sorts of weird places that people who have nothing to do with her sort of run into her, like you said, ready to have a new moment. So let's get back to that with the talk you gave in Iowa City. What's this new moment maybe Flannery studies is on the precipice of?
So I really think we are at the beginning of this swell, this wave of a revival in letters in general. I think in part prompted by this machine age, robot intelligence. People are going to be, I think, very quickly, if they're not already, sort of very tired of this implication that the machine can do everything better than we can, are going to be looking for what's unique in human utterance that we should listen to it. What do we need out of the arts? What do we need out of arts and letters, out of the humanities? And precisely the preservation of what it means to be human, what it means to think and feel and see and perceive. Flannery, from the very onset of her literary career, is deeply, deeply concerned with matters of vision, spiritual vision as well as natural vision, seeing things as they are rather than, as St. John Henry Newman said, rather than as we would have them be. And she's very much concerned, I think, with self-knowledge. In fact, to the extent that if she is ever canonized, which I think is not out of court to at least imagine, she may be canonized as a patron saint of self-knowledge, among other things. And I can think of a few other patronages that she might end up having, but there's this deep thread in her work. In one of the, you mentioned the prayers, one of them that we use as kind of a tradition almost now in the UST Master of Fine Arts program is her prayer about being the slim crescent of a moon, right? All she can see of God is the slim crescent, and herself being the earth's shadow that is in the way of the moon. And she asks God, help me get out of the way so that I can see you more completely. Help me get down under things and find where you are. It's such a resonant thing to ask. I mean, is that not what we all, if we're honest with ourselves, really want, is just to get out of the way so that God can work, can move, and in us, and we can know that that's happening and not have to be in any doubt that that's happening. Just have the certainty, the clarity, that confidence that the saints are given, that it so often seems so elusive to us, so far away. She feels that distance, and she wants that clarity, and she's not afraid. She's not too proud to ask for it. She accuses herself of a lot of pride. She talks about this both in the journal and in the letters, ate up with pride, right? That's in the Temple of the Holy Ghost as well. She attributes that to her character, a born liar and slothful, and eaten up with pride, the worst sin of all, right? And so she's seeing that this is true from the very beginning, and then it's fascinating to see how she traces the threads through faith, hope, and love. And she says she feels she lacks charity, and she feels that faith is this very dark thing to her. But she can hardly articulate what she means by hope, but she seems to be the most confident in hope of the three. She gives the least formulaic definition of it, and the most, I think, heartfelt. Right, she talks about hope as this vague thing keeping me in, right? When everything in her environment is trying to over-intellectualize and over-analyze and over-naturalize whatever in her wants the faith. She feels that hope is the thing that's anchoring her. Which is fascinating, the anchor being the image traditionally for hope. And she also seems to feel that there's some kind of anchoring quality that an explicit discussion of faith could give to her last novel. She sort of sinks this scene of Walter, the main, one of the main protagonists. She sinks in this conversion scene early on, And around it, she's also building this need for growth and charity by Walter. He needs to somehow come to terms with the challenge that's posed to him by Unigid, this liberal from up north who's kind of based on her friend Marriott Lee, who's going to come down and destroy all his illusions and shatter his pride and his vain self-perception, his vanity, and get him out of himself and make him see himself as he really is. I think she's longing for some kind of movement like that. She's almost kind of trying to will it into being, and she realizes, though, that this is not something you can will into being. This is something that she has to wait patiently for, that she has to wait in hope for. It's not something that she can create by herself. And yet there's hope, I think, implicit in the fact that she sits down, she continues to sit at the desk every day, even though the words that she wants aren't coming and the novel that she wants to make isn't coming to her. She is accepting what's coming, and she is accepting what she can do and can see now. And the images of self-knowledge in the last two stories that she ever writes, Revelation and Parker's Back, are just incredibly moving, incredibly resonant, and almost, there's almost a kind of sorrow to the joy that they imply, the joy of the vision across the sky at the end of Revelation, this jubilant leap toward God. And yet Ruby Turpin, who's seeing it, is still grounded. She's still standing there by the hog pen, right? She's not yet at the point where she can jump up and join even the part of the procession whose virtues are being burned away. Right? She sees what's coming for her, but she's not in that yet. And same with Parker's Back. The vision of Christ in that is, he's given the burning bush, right? He's given the sort of naturalistic image for God, but he's not given the humanistic image for God yet, right? It's on his back, literally where he can't see it. It's part of him. It's integrated with him, but it's not something that he can benefit from or have a vision of himself. And of course, what does it bring him but suffering, right? She's working with the fear of suffering as a kind of block to the vision that she wants to have, and she's showing up and she's continuing to make art out of it, and she's continuing to show up every moment that she's possibly able to, even as Lucas is, having the complications that are going to end her life. She's not giving up. There's sort of perseverance to the end that I do think is a model, is an image of hope that we can hang on to and try to emulate.
No, that's wonderful. Folks, you've just been given like a deep dive into Flannery O'Connor's work pro bono. So donate to Iowa Catholic Radio. But during the break, Katy, we were talking about Why Do the Heathen Rage? This is an incomplete novel by O'Connor. And I'll be honest, I'm less familiar with, where that stood and what kind of work it was. Interestingly enough, as I was doing some research for the interview, Jessica Hooten-Wilson, who taught for some time at my alma mater, she's studied this a bit, but it sounds like you have as well. Is it sort of like one of those things where it's like just tantalizing to think about what it might have been like if O'Connor would have had the time to finish this? And as you've looked into it, like, does it sort of like, where does it stand in continuity with what she had already written?
It is clearly a development. She's moving in a direction that's a bit more naturalistic, a bit more, she's imitating Mauriac more than I think she's imitating in her prior work, figures like Hawthorne, and there's sort of shades of Gogol in some of her stories, shades of Chekhov, the Russians, right? She's moving more toward what Ralph calls her Dostoevskian religious consciousness, But also, I like what Dr. Wilson says in her commentary on the version of Why the Heathen Rage that she presents in that recent book from Brazos Press. She says, because it's unfinished, we can let our stories pick up where O'Connor's left off. We can kind of take that and run with it in the direction that we feel ourselves called.
For me, and I know this is just a sort of trick of editing, they ended her first grouping of short stories with King of Birds, right? Her essay on peacocks. First of all, it's one of my favorite writings of her because it shows, I think, Southerners, but Flannery herself does really good, is the sort of love that you have to have if you kind of hate something. The peacocks are amazing birds. She admits this, but her whole point of her story is you got to be around one. And it strikes me as 1,000 stories I've heard Southern aunts and Southern uncles tell, right? About the only way you can love something that just irks you to death every waking moment of your life. And I feel like that sort of French turn you're talking about, or even the sort of Dostoevskian one, that she starts to develop the tantalizing idea about what she would have done if she saw it to completion. But I think there's something to that. You're right. You said Parker's Back, which of course hammering us on the head, but also in a subtle way, that this Pentecostal who's mad that her man got a tattoo on his back of Christ is whipping him, but also of course whipping Christ then, right? Reenacting the passion. But in these later stories, right, it's like you said, the sort of power she felt to know where you were going to go with these things. In some ways, I kind of think Why Doth the Heathen Rage being left undone, it's a little bit more poetic than I know she intended it. I'm sure she would have wanted to have it done and leave it, but before she had to leave this world behind. But do you get that with reading it, that there's almost a sort of poetic way that this was the story of all of them that was left undone, just waiting for us, like you said, to sort of come back at this moment to reconsider Flannery?
There's something almost encouraging about it for me as a working writer, because we get to see this incredible mind at work in a way that in the finished work, she's already done. The polishing is there. The gloss is on it. For the unfinished work, for the things that she never really meant for our eyes, we see her in process. We see her becoming. And it gives, I think, hope that maybe we too one day can become too, however unpropitious the first draft might look.
Well, I think that's why. I mean, I'm not trying to hammer this home, but it is our radio show, Bud, so I can yammer on. I really do think that there's something about peacocks and how she viewed her work. I do think she thinks that whatever inspiration and grace is that becomes awe and wonder, and then the productive act of art is, I just think you can tell for her, it's like you backed up with what you were saying about being at the church that she went to at University of Iowa. She really struggled with this stuff, and writing, you can tell if you read The Habit of Being, if you read Mystery and Manners, it was something that flummoxed her, right? It was hard, and she really struggled with it, and I think she sort of gave us an example of what it looked like for her to write by writing about those birds. However, it's like you said, we get to see that in this unfinished work. And like you said, I know some people thought it was daring to publish someone's unwritten work, but I really do think that of all the people, Flannery would actually be, if not highly encouraged, okay with it, so that, like you said, we could see what it meant to really wrestle, to be Jacob and wrestle with the angel when it comes to writing something beautiful.
I'm grateful it's out in the world. I know I needed it. I hope it's as helpful to others as it has been to me. And I think, it's another example of how Flannery resists the sort of easy stories that we want to tell about her, and maybe other kinds of easy stories as well. She's always going to push for the complication. She's always going to try to make it more difficult, try to make us see like the peacock with the eyes of the church, and try to make us see things that are just there to glorify God and just for themselves.
Yeah, I agreed. Amen. Look, we're running out of time, but I want to make sure people, if they want to find out more of your work, what you're up to, can you just go through and let people know what they should go check out?
Yeah, absolutely. So please go check out wordonfire.com. Wordonfire.org /Luminor. You can see where we have the inaugural Luminor short story contest you can submit to. We've also got we're going to have titles hopefully to announce soon. We've got a great lineup coming up for 2026, early 2027. The catalog is underway, so please sign up for those updates. We'd love to have you along for the ride. And if you want to read some of my writing, you can go to katycarl.substack.com. My Substack is called Depth Perception, and it's an extended engagement with the ideas of contemplative realism by Joshua Wren.
Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being on The Uncommon Good. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. God bless.
For Bo Bonner and Bud Marr, we'll be back right after this. So wonderful to have you with us. Like I said at the beginning of the show, you, of course, heard Bud in their interview, doing our interview with Katy Carl. One wonderful interview. So glad that we got a chance to talk with her. Talk about wonderful things happening in the state of Iowa, particularly about Flannery O'Connor and her time over at University of Iowa and the Iowa Writers Workshop. So glad that. So Bud's not here though to wrap things up. So you're just going to hear from me. So make sure to try to hit some of the classic points Bud's always making sure to do. So he's usually talking about ways you can join Iowa Catholic Radio and our prayer life. So starting early, you can actually do at 4 a.m. the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, and then 4:30 the Rosary. That's in the morning. That is early, but you can do it. Then at 6 a.m. Rosary with Bishop Robert Barron. Hear the daily readings from the USCCB at 6:30. Then, of course, during the week, the Catholic Morning Show at 7 a.m. You will, make sure to join us. It's a great time. Then if you go through later in the day, 10 a.m., we have the Iowa Catholic Radio Rosary. Daily Mass at 10:30. Of course, this is on weekdays, I should point out. Wait a little longer. Divine Mercy Chaplet at 2:57 p.m. That's some exact time, but make sure to keep that in mind. Then finally, we have an 8:30 p.m. Holy Rosary. And, that rounds out our day in prayer. I always like to make sure that if you want to join Iowa Catholic Radio for events that are going on, easy to go check that out. All you do is go to iowacatholicradio.com. We always have First Friday Masses, and maybe we don't establish that enough, but anytime there is a First Friday, we have Mass at 11:30 a.m. So, of course, the one that just happened is April 4th. So all you got to do is keep in your mind the next one that would happen would be May 2nd, the First Friday Mass that's coming up next. You also, if you want to get a chance to go to the Man Up West Power Lunch, April 11th at noon at St. Francis of Assisi Parish with meatless meals. So, I know it's usually Chick-fil-A, but no worries. Meatless meals, so you can do this as well. We have Father Bruce Riebe, a priest of the Byzantine Catholic Eparchy, sort of like their version of diocese, over in Parma, Ohio. It consists of 12 Midwestern states, and so they're trying to they're getting into Iowa. So it's very interesting liturgy if you've never been to it. However, he's going to be talking about what Byzantine Catholic Easter, Pascha, looks like, but then also talking about Eastern Catholic outreach here in our area, so you don't want to miss that. And then the big one probably coming up next is on May 21st, the Iowa Catholic Radio Golf Classic. Bud and I have, done it more than once, and every time either got last place as a team or second to last. So if you want to go feel good about yourself, know there's a team that you can beat. 4-person scramble format, lunches provided, and enjoy the 19th hole inside the clubhouse with awards and heavy hors d'oeuvres. This annual event helps fund the operations of Iowa Catholic Radio. Again, May 21st, the Legacy Golf Club in Norwalk. And you go to iowacatholicradio.com to find out more and register for that event. It's always a privilege to be a part of your listening. And again, I know an hour-long show is a lot of time to devote. But like I said, we had our big Encounter of the Eucharist 20-year celebration with Father Mike Schmitz this last week. And not only to hear some of the testimonies that brought us up, which, again, made me blush to know that there's people who listen to the show and then loved it enough that when asked about their Iowa Catholic Radio experience of listening. They mention us. We're very humbled by that fact, but also just the idea of 20 years of Iowa Catholic Radio, this show being part of it for 8 years. When we 8 years ago started this show, we were very much wet behind the ears and decided to give it a go at the behest of John Leonetti, who also came up with the title, The Uncommon Good. Tip our hat to John. But we can't tell you how much we appreciate all the people who've listened, all the encouragement that we've had, and the ability to grow up on air, because there was no way Bud and I were quite ready to be on the radio, but now it just seems as natural as riding a bike. Once more time, folks, thank you for listening. This is The Uncommon Good. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, family, city, state, solar system, galaxy, the whole kit and caboodle. This is The Uncommon Good, and we'll be back next week.